Well, we have a treaty which has the bearing of U.S. law, and so that treaty would have to be abrogated first, or else he would be asking his military to accomplish something that is not in accordance with the law.
Hello and welcome to Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. Now, today on day 1427, I think it is, of Vladimir Putin's 10-day special military operation or full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and that's coming up to the start of his fifth year towards the end of next month. We're very privileged to be talking to General Philip Breedlove. Now, General Breedlove, a retired four-star US general, US Air Force general, who was the 17th Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, SACEUR, as we all refer to them as. You were NATO Allied Command Operations from 2013, 2016, but it was a dual-hatted role, I think, while you were there, because you served as Commander of US European Command, US EUCOM, and your background is actually, you're a fighter jockey. You were an F-16 pilot. General Philip, welcome back to Frontline.
Good to be back. Good to be back. And yep, I've 8 tours in Europe, so I felt very at home there as I was had the privilege to be the SACEUR.
Well, I was a planner in the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps, HQ ARC, and then a G2 in HQ ARC as well. So our paths have crossed. I'm sure we've talked about this at some stage beforehand. But things are going on in Europe at the moment. But before we get into that, what's going on in Ukraine? We've got the 20-point plan that the US team sat down with the Ukrainian team and Europe and agreed was then put to the Russians. Vladimir Putin has done as he's always done and said no. And then POTUS has come out and for some reason or other blamed the Ukrainians for letting it fall apart again. Whilst on the front lines, we're seeing Ukraine actually holding its own, if not taking a little bit of territory back. What's your reading of what's going on, both from a tactical perspective, but also militarily at the operational level, and then strategically at the political level?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I love this format because we can actually talk and not try to squeeze everything into 2 sound bites in 3 minutes. And so I appreciate the opportunity. A few things about Russia. I think Mr. Putin is very, very happy that there's a kerfuffle over Greenland right now.
We'll come on to that in a moment, yes.
Things are not going well for him in Ukraine right now. You have it right. They made a tiny advance in one area and they backed up significantly in 2 other areas. And some of Mr. Putin's claims are being played out as incorrect very publicly now in Ukraine. And so Mr. Putin very much, I think, wants eyes off of what's going on in Ukraine right now. And please, Philip, I don't want to take umbrage with you, but you talk about this war in terms of 5 years or 4 years or 3 years. This war's been going on for 12 years. It started when I was the SACEUR with the invasion and occupation of Crimea, then the invasion and occupation of portions of East Donbass, and then for almost 5 years on the line of contact where soldiers on both sides were dying. And then we come to this, what I call the third phase of the war, where Russia tried to invade and take over all of Ukraine and roundly got spanked and sent home in most cases. And now we're in this grinding attritional war, and Mr. Putin appears to have no idea of the loss of manpower. So lots of things going on there. Strategically, I just want to say one other thing. This whole business about Mr. Putin has once again said no. I repeat this all the time, but I want to say it one more time. Putin never has been a partner for peace in Ukraine. Putin is not now a partner for peace in Ukraine, and Putin will never in the future be a partner for peace in Ukraine. When world leaders finally come to understand and accept who and what Mr. Putin is, we might get on to some more serious business in Ukraine. Right now, every time there's a push on him, he dangles some sort of a bright, shiny object that distracts everybody and we forget that he never has, is not now, nor will he ever in the future be a partner for peace in Ukraine.
So there's a couple of things come out of that before we get on to some of the bigger things that are happening around the world at the moment, if there is anything bigger than a major conflict in Europe. But the first one is the Ukrainians. A part of any peace deal is a security guarantee from, and underpinning that security guarantee, Europe is saying the United States needs to be part of it. But there was a security guarantee with the Budapest memorandum. And that had the United States underpinning it, had the United Kingdom underpinning it, it had Russia underpinning it. How can the Ukrainians ever trust anything that's on paper again?
Well, it's a great question. I don't know if they ever can. What the world has done by disarming and disadvantaging Ukraine through the Budapest Memorandum, and now turning our back on the agreements we made in the Budapest Memorandum. It's legend. It says a lot about what the world is and how fast we turn to accommodate our own needs so quickly. And so I think if I was Ukraine, I would be pushing really hard for concrete um, guarantees and public and world known and world accepted guarantees, so that those who enter into those guarantees would be a little bit more pressured to meet their obligations, unlike what we have done in relation to the Budapest Memorandum.
Why do you think President Trump keeps blaming the Ukrainians when it's quite clear it's Vladimir Putin that is refusing any form of compromise?
Well, our U.S. president has a unique way of trying to negotiate. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a few minutes.
Yes.
And part of his negotiation is he's rather insensitive to who's right and who's wrong. He's just trying to force all parties to an agreement. The whole world, even the BRICS countries, know, that Putin is still a KGB agent. He is a self confessed war criminal, as he has rewarded his minister who runs the program for snatching Ukrainian children out of their families and taking them back to Russia. We know who we're dealing with, but we want to put that sort of in a box so that we can continue these negotiations around him. I don't necessarily argue with that. We need to keep talking. We need to find a way forward with Mr. Putin. But every time we do, we need to understand who Mr. Putin is. Okay? He's a war criminal running an illegal, immoral, and inhumane war. And we need to make sure we measure everything we do with, for, and about him with those facts first in evidence.
Well, one of the things I agree with President Trump on is the fact that Europe for too many years has relied on the United States to provide a security underpinning and a NATO underpinning, whilst European nations have failed to invest in defence. And this is something that President Trump has put an awful lot of pressure on Europe to try and build up and increase its defence capability, which, give Europe its due, it's starting to do, and it's doing that. However, we're seeing what's going on at the moment with regard to President Trump's line on Greenland. Do you think he's taking this hardline line to try and force Europe to accelerate its increased spending and defence to provide that defensive guarantee, rather than him wanting to follow through on military action into Greenland and take ownership of it, as he keeps saying, is most important? Because there's a 1951 international agreement between the United States and the Kingdom of Denmark, including Greenland, that allows the Americans to put as much military capability into Greenland and the surrounding waters as it wants without having to get further authorizations.
Well, wow, there was about 12 questions in that string. Let's back way up to the first thing I want to point out. Regardless of the tactics, techniques, and procedures the American president, my president, has used to get Europe more involved in its defense. Pushing aside what are seen as some fairly objectionable tactics, we need to give the US president some credit in that he's the first president in the history of NATO to get NATO to increase their spending on defense. And so, whether you like his tactics or not, he is the only US president who has been successful at that. And so we have to acknowledge that. I've been accused of drinking the bathwater. After living 8 times in Europe and having 2 children born there, I'm pretty quick to make sure people understand the value of Europe. But I'm also agreeing with what you said, Philip, and that is that Europe and America took an extended acquisition holiday and was not investing in their military. America pretty much the same, oh, by the way. But we didn't take the cuts as deeply as the rest of Europe did because, as you pointed out, Europe was relying on America as their backstop. And I think that probably the toughest conversations in European capitals today is people are finally sort of understanding that under this administration, they've got to be a much more self-sufficient, because America is not going to, under this administration, is not going to, be what they were for nearly 70 years prior to this. So now extrapolating forward into what's going on with Greenland, let's get a couple of admissions of fact. Greenland is incredibly important. It really is. America, I don't know about the people in UK, but real estate agents in America, they have this famous saying, location, location, location.
It's a program across in the UK on television and very popular.
Okay, so Greenland sits in an extremely strategic location. There is no doubt about it. And we know that China and Russia are very interested in Greenland. Now, this administration sees a big military threat from China about Greenland. I and others don't see the military threat about Greenland from China. What we see is a commercial threat. China desperately wants to be an Arctic nation. They call themselves a near Arctic nation. They want to be an Arctic nation and sit on the Arctic Council so they can help develop the policies on use of the Arctic. And that's because of the incredible commercial gain presented by the Northern Passage, which runs along the receding ice on the north side of Russia. Most of us see China as a big competitive commercial issue when it comes to Greenland. Now, on the flip side, Russia is a military threat when it comes to Greenland in two senses for sure. One, as you know, we in the military talk about the GUIK gap, GIUK gap. That body of water between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK is the exit for all of Russia's most strategic naval assets to come out of the bastion waters of the Russian north and to get out into the Atlantic to cause problems for NATO. And so Russia is right now a military problem. And you've seen a lot of graphics running around the internet here lately about the ICBMs that will fly over Greenland into the United States. So sensors in Greenland, maybe not so much interceptors, but sensors in Greenland are extremely important to the ICBM issue for Russian attack of America. So just to recap real quick, I see many of us, and certainly I, see China as an economic problem in Greenland, not so much a military problem right now, but we definitely see Russia as a military problem in Greenland. And so this is something to be dealt with. And I would just say, and I know you may go there in a few minutes, we have existing agreements with Greenland, Denmark, and NATO. We have documents signed, I think in 1951 or somewhere. I need to do my homework a little bit there, but there are existing agreements on U.S. basing and capabilities in Greenland, and I have been very vocal. I think that everything we need to do in a defense sense can be done through those agreements. Now, we all know that there's also the issue of rare earth minerals and other wealth that are along the coast and under the ice in Greenland. And I think those are playing heavily into the decisions being made in Washington, D.C. right now.
Yes, well, it was the 1951 treaty, and from what I understand from some mining experts, those minerals are there, but they're exceptionally difficult to get out of the ground. In the same way that Venezuelan oil is exceptionally difficult to get out. So it's interesting, but General Genkovich, the current SACEUR, has decided that he has to go on a bit of emergency leave for 3 months, and you're standing in for him just as all of this is going on. So with your SACEUR hat on, what are you saying to the European leaders, and what are you saying back to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and into the White House to try and manage what is going on and the fallout that there is that probably has Vladimir Putin sitting behind his big oak desk in Moscow with a very large glass of best Russian vodka over ice and a big white cat in his knee, and he's smiling going, there's nothing I need to do here. The West is beating itself to pieces.
So I'm going to give you the punchline, and then I'll explain the punchline. The punchline is that in a defense sense, I'm not going to address the commercial opportunities in Greenland. That's not for me. I'm definitely not an economist. I'm an engineer and an international security affairs guy. And so, in a military security sense, the best way forward, the absolute best way forward, is cooperation with NATO, Denmark, and Greenland. And so, just one more point to the punchline. NATO is the most successful military alliance in the history of the world. And I would tell you, and I've said many times at the 70th and then the 75th anniversary of NATO, I said the following: NATO is going to be more important in the next 75 years than it was in the last 75 years, because the threat is getting more and more complicated, especially in the gray zones, the cyber zones, the hybrid zones, as NATO calls it. And so, based on those two first lines, I would just tell you that if I was a senior military leader again and in a position of some authority, I would be working as hard as I could to find a mutual way forward whereby we remain solid in the alliance, we remain true to our allies, and we're able to accomplish our requirements. I believe, based on the treaty we just discussed and other agreements that have been in place since then, that the military piece of this is relatively easy. Relatively easy. But the commercial sense, the access to minerals and things, which I prefer not to discuss, that's a whole different matter. And so, if I were those two gentlemen you were pointing out to me, I would be working for ways to solve the president's concerns on security within a cooperative effort with the alliance, with Denmark, and with Finland. And everything I did would be focused on that. I would just point out one quick thing I would tell him. If you look at our presence in Iceland, or excuse me, in Greenland, I'm sorry. if you looked at our presence in Greenland over the last decade, to include President Trump's first term as president, we have been steadily decreasing our number of U.S. military and steadily decreasing our investment in military positions in Greenland. So our signal to the world has just changed immensely because we've been steadily reducing our concern about Greenland until just now. So an easy first fix is to start reinvesting in U.S. positions in Greenland, resending troops to Greenland in accordance with the agreements we already have, and begin to show Mr. Putin, who's our primary military enemy in this area, and China, who's trying to find an inroads in commercial issues, show them that America is a part now of Greenland and will be a part for ad nauseum in Greenland, and show them the strength of the U.S. military in Greenland. And all of that can be done inside of the agreements we have now.
Well, President Trump's social media in the past 24 hours, he's put two pictures out. One showed him and the Secretary of War, and I think it was Secretary of State Marco Rubio with a US flag on what seemed like Greenland-type territory, and another had them sitting in front of a map which showed the US flag over what is now Greenland, but also Canada as well. He keeps talking about wanting to own the real estate and own the land, and why if you're only renting, invest in it. And he is a property magnate by background. If he decided that the United States wanted to take ownership of Greenland and give an order for the US military to do that, do you think that anyone would execute that order?
Well, we have a treaty which has the bearing of U.S. law. And so that treaty would have to be abrogated first, or else he would be asking his military to accomplish something that is not in accordance with the law.
Well, that makes it very, very clear indeed. And hopefully our commentators that are talking about this will keep going back to that 1951 treaty and start to quote it. But from the one thing that this is doing is it's distracting from what's going on in Ukraine, and it's allowing Vladimir Putin, certainly in the press and the global commentary, a degree of breathing time. And that breathing time, it even seems that he's been invited to this new peace board for Gaza. Whether that's a tongue-in-cheek invite or a realistic invite or not, I don't know. What do you think Vladimir Putin's making of everything that's going on?
Well, as we said at the top of the show, things are not going well for Vladimir Putin in Ukraine right now. Things are not going well in several places about his economy and other things right now. And I think Vladimir Putin is very happy right now to have the world staring at Greenland and not staring at his poor performance in Ukraine. And I think we need to remember what we said at the top of the show. Every time we think about Mr. Putin, we need to remember KGB, war criminal. And anything we do with him needs to be in the context of who that human being is. And then certainly we need to continue talking to him, because just stopping talking to him is not an answer. But we need to remember every time we deal with him who he is. He never has been a partner for peace in Ukraine. He is not now a partner for peace in Ukraine, and he never will be in the future a partner for peace in Ukraine.
So, as we come to the end of our chat here, where do you see the next couple of months going? Dare I say next couple of months or next couple of days? Where do you see the next couple of months going?
Well, here's what I'm a man of faith, and here's what I'm praying for. We have a clear way ahead in cooperation. If this is truly about security, we can solve all our security concerns via cooperation. And so I think what we need to keep our eyes on is how all the other things about Greenland play out. And those, again, I'm not really qualified to talk to.
And with Ukraine?
With Ukraine, I am encouraged. I'm more than a glass half full now about what Europe is beginning to do with Ukraine, and the backbone is getting stiffer about Ukraine. And if Ukraine can survive, Russia will fall. They are moving forward now because they're still convinced that senior Western leaders are going to give them what they cannot take in Ukraine. Do we need to say that again? They are convinced that senior Western leaders are going to give them what they cannot take in Ukraine. And so Ukraine needs to survive. If Ukraine survives, this will all work itself out.
Well, I think on that note, because that's a positive note out of everything that's going on at the moment, General Philip Breedlove, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today on Frontline.
Thank you. Good to see you again.